Call to order the meeting of the North Andover Planning Board, December 18th, 2018. We are going to go in the order of the agenda. So we will start with 31 Inglewood Road, David Kalemba, A&R plan, remove 2 lot lines to create 1 lot from 3. Do we have anyone here to speak on that?
Mr. Kalemba is here, but I think I can preface a little bit about this.
Okay.
So, actually, there's 3 lots shown in the plan. The lot to the right, where the proposed lot line is to be removed, the Kalembas bought that parcel in 1996. They provided the deed for that. They are looking to remove that line, and essentially, it's an undersized lot. It's not a buildable lot, so they're just combining it with their existing lot. The line that runs perpendicular to Inglewood Street, lot 125 in the rear there. There was actually an A&R done many years ago that appears to never have been recorded at the registry, although our assessor has removed that line on his records. So our GIS system would show this as 2 lots, where the registry of deeds still has this as 3 lots. And so this will clean that up as well. So it's simply removing 2 lot lines. The lot is a conforming size, frontage is conforming.
What's the total size with the 3 together?
The 3 together, 25,000 if I remember right. Let me zoom in. I'm sorry, 15,000 square feet. The required is 12.5 in this zoning district. It's the R4 zoning district. So it makes it a conforming lot.
It does make it, when it was
For
probably
area.
a pre-existing
Yes.
non-conforming use.
Yep.
So,
The subdivision plan that starts on these deed references in the notes column is back to, I believe, 1906, and these were laid out as 5,000 square foot lots up and down Inglewood and all these streets. So, and they reference the plan all the way back to that one.
Maybe it was with an I. Looks different on the plan. So is this on Maitland or is it on Inglewood?
It's on Inglewood, 31 Inglewood.
But at the corner.
Yep.
Right around the corner from here. Just a picture of the house. Okay, yep.
so if they put a provision that the lot cannot be further subdivided on the thing, it looks okay to me.
Okay.
It's not done in the most elegant way, but it actually is pretty understandable. You can put anything on it you want.
I don't know. I mean, I think it either meets the rules or it doesn't, right? Either approval is not required or it is.
No,
So-
approval is not required, but you can say that it is a, I mean, they're going the other way, so it doesn't really matter.
They're
So,
making it larger.
Yeah,
So, I mean, they're not changing any of the access, and they have the proper frontage, so it seems like approval would not be required.
no, but just put in the notes that.
And for zoning purposes, those 2 lots have merged anyways.
Yeah.
For zoning purposes, he's
Right,
owned it since
yeah.
96.
So, yeah, just in our notes say it's now a legally conforming lot,
I'm sorry,
that it is a legally conforming lot, yeah.
in our
Yeah,
minute
in our
notes.
notes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so can we get a motion to approve the A&R plan for 31 Inglewood Road?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that's
Okay.
approved.
So, Mr. Kalemba, if you have the Mylar, I'll take it now, and you can,
I have everything.
you have the Mylar, okay. So I will sign that tomorrow.
the board what happened. Nope,
We already
you're all
decided.
set. You're all set.
No, what I was gonna say was, the town cut the one line going this way off, but they never shut the other one down. This is what it originally did. They never cut that 125 line and 126 off,
Okay,
okay? And we have the deeds and everything in.
all right.
They're all good.
So you're gonna make it 1 lot. All right. Very good. Look forward to seeing it. Great.
Very much.
Go back tomorrow, I'll sign that, and you can bring it to the registry. Okay.
Whatever you wanna do.
All right,
All right. 230.
Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
231 Middlesex Street and 157 Waverly Road. Lot line change.
Okay, let me just cast this. So the applicants are here again. Jim, if you want to speak to it, or you want me to speak to it?
Why don't you tell us and then tell us about it, and then if we have any questions, we'll ask.
So my mom lives at 231 Middlesex Street. My family's been living there since 1966. And Mr. Froberg just recently bought 157 about maybe 5 years ago, Brian?
2013.
And I just approached him a couple of years ago and asked him if he'd be willing to sell me a little bit of land to extend my mother's lot, and he agreed.
So this is at the corner of Middlesex and Waverly?
Not exactly on the corner. There's actually a parcel in between.
Oh, okay.
The parcel shown as James Lumel, I guess, is the
Lumel.
corner lot.
Yes.
So one's just behind that on Middlesex, and one's down the street on Middlesex, and one's behind it on Waverly.
So where does it connect?
Right in the
Back
back
area.
half.
Yeah, where Lot A is identified?
So Lot A used to be part of Lot 14, and it's now being 1413, and it's now going to be part of 1439.
Correct.
Okay.
So again, this brings the area of 1439 to 12,723 square feet, which again meets the 12,005 requirement in the zoning district.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think this one's.
Any issues, Gene?
No, I'm sorry, there's one issue. So I have pointed out to Jim that the address on the A&R plan is listed as 159 Waverly. That needs to be corrected in your motion to 157 Waverly.
Which Waverly, his parcel is 157, 159. It's a two-family, so,
But
yeah, we'll
it's a
get it
two-family.
changed.
Our assessor database has it as 157, because that's the taxed parcel.
Okay.
So you rent out the other one, it's not a duplex, right? It's a two-family house.
Yeah.
Okay, so our assessor records are 157.
Okay, so,
So I make a motion to approve with that change noted.
Second.
okay, all in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
All right. So approved as to 231 Middlesex and 157 Waverly Road. The plan needs to be adjusted accordingly. Okay, lot release, Ruddock Estates subdivision.
Dies my lot to me, I'll sign it, and you have to record it at the registry. Okay? You're welcome.
Thank you, gentlemen. Hi. Welcome back. What would you like to tell us about your request for a lot release?
Brian Vaughn from Smolek and Vaughn on behalf of the Ruddocks. You may recall, we were in front of you before. We previously had Lot 36 released. This was a subdivision where effectively all the lots really front on Great Pond Road. The subdivision roadway was never to be constructed. So at the time we were before you last, we had Lot 36 released, Lot 37, 38, and 39 could not be released until there was a drainage as-built plan that was prepared and provided. So we've submitted the drainage as-built plan. One of the lots is currently under agreement for sale in January. So we think that we've got you what you need for the lot releases. I think there was one issue that was raised by the town engineer late this afternoon about the plan not having some reference data on it. So what we would like to request, if in fact you wanted that information added to the as-built, that we could have it approved for lot release subject to the town engineer and planner's satisfaction with the reference information being added to the plan.
Attorney Vaughn, you said 37, 38, and 39? Our agenda says
Yes.
37, 28,
Yeah.
and 39?
Yep,
Which is correct?
37, 38, and 39.
Okay, so the agenda is incorrect there. Okay, all right. Gene, any issues or comments?
No, as Brian stated, that few revisions just came in today. It was adding this engineered stamp to the plan, adding the north arrow, and the engineer has commented that normally you would see references to the subdivision plan and whatnot. We have bond money still held on the project. I recommend we maintain that bond money until at least the spring, where we can see that the lumen seeding that was just done has taken and the trees survived the winter. So we have just over $11,000 in the performance bond. We have a $5,000 watershed bond and a $5,000 site opening bond. And they're not here to request that at this time. It's simply to release the lots. There's no further construction to be done on this site. The only construction was to demolish a structure and relocate a house onto a lot that was created through the subdivision. So everything else was definitive subdivision on paper and the drainage.
So, there's no more work that the applicant has to do that, for which we would want to hold a bond greater than what we have.
Only the landscaping portion of this work,
Yeah,
which has been done. We just haven't been able to verify that
Okay.
it's taken hold.
You or Monica went to the site and
Yep.
verified?
Yep. And there was significant input from our town engineer regarding this drainage. It was a very complicated drainage design, so again, I cautioned Brian that unless he got to that and was able to review it as well, I wouldn't be able to make a recommendation, but he has done that.
Okay.
So I make a motion to release the 3 lots, subject to getting the proper paperwork in hand.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so Brian, you submitted a Form J that does not have the engineered stamp. I'll need the stamp on
It
it.
actually, it has it. It's, but it wasn't due,
That's the one I have that I printed off.
okay,
Normally, the stamp would go right here.
yeah, okay.
So just if you get me that when they revise the plans.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right, moving quickly along. We will now go to our discussion items. So we have 2 discussion items on for tonight. Bowden Capital Group, Alex Loth is here, and Tom Zarico, 1665 Great Pond Road. So we're going to take each of those in turn. Some of you I know were here last time. Some of you who are watching at home watched last time. For anyone who didn't, or just for good information, these are both citizen-sponsored petitions, discussion items, actually at this point, just discussion items for potential zoning changes. At this point, they have not been brought from the planning board or sponsored by the planning board. The purpose of these meetings is to discuss these items, and at a subsequent meeting, most likely either the first or the second meeting in January, depending on how far we get and how much more comment we think we need, the planning board will take a position on whether or not we want to sponsor either or both of these amendments, potential zoning amendments, or any others that potentially come in. If we do not, then the citizens have the right to try to bring those to town meeting. If we do, then we will have it brought to town meeting. Either way, if they are to become enacted as bylaws, they will be required to go to town meeting. The purpose of these discussions is just gaining more information for the board, to gather public opinion, and to better educate ourselves on whether these are amendments we wish to sponsor, and if so, whether we'd like to make changes to them as we feel appropriate. Okay, so with that being said, we'll call up Bowden Capital Group, Alex Loth. Alex, am I pronouncing your last name correctly? No. Okay, correct us. That's why.
It's Loth. Thank you
Loth,
for
okay.
asking. I
So
appreciate it.
You need some, like an E or something at the end there to.
We could spell it a lot of different ways.
All
We
right.
put a little line over
Yeah,
the O so everyone
that would
gets
be
it.
helpful for me, thank you.
Yeah. Important piece of business. I think that it's John Simon's birthday today.
That's right. How did you know?
There's a
Happy birthday, John.
there's a young redheaded lady in New York City who I'm acquainted with who.
Oh, Lizzie,
Yeah. Happy birthday. So we talked about this at the last meeting. Bowden Capital owns 2 properties on the corner of Hillside Road and Route 114, 190 Hillside Road and 582 Turnpike Street. We've been contemplating trying to do something commercial with these properties for some time. Had some conversations with Eric Kafori and with Gene Enright about the best path to do something commercially on these properties. It's my understanding that years back the CDD districts were enacted, and these 2 properties are in CDD 2. My understanding of the intent of that zone was to further commercial development on Turnpike Street. The problem with that, and again, we went over this the last meeting, so I'll try to be brief, is that CDD2 requires a 2-acre parcel to do anything commercially. And it is, we think, difficult, if not impossible, to get to 2 acres in that part of the road there, so we've done our best to put together some parcels. The 2 we have are a little over an acre, and adding more becomes pretty much unfeasible. We are working with Mr. Zarico at 182 Turnpike Street. We anticipated perhaps being able to put that property together with these others. That may still happen, but at this point, given where we are, I want to give the board some certainty so you have actually something to think about and discuss rather than an unknown. So at this point, we're asking you to consider those 2 lots, the 2 that we actually do control. The green and yellow. So the green one that's heading up Hillside and the yellow one next to it. The one that's furthest to the south and east is 182 Turnpike Street, which is owned by John Zarico, who's here tonight. So we feel like
Way John actually comes behind, at the rear of the 2 parcels that they do own, and it exits onto Hillside Road. So to get to that house, you're
Yeah,
coming
I'm
from Hillside.
familiar with that,
And there's a
yeah.
drainage and an access easement across these other 2 parcels.
across the back of the lot, there's a utility easement and an access easement, which of course we would respect with our development, our proposed development on 190 and 582. So we'd like to have the board consider, we originally were talking about general business. At Gene's suggestion, we are open to whatever business zone would allow us to do a bank with a drive-through. B1, B2, I think, has been discussed as zones that would make that happen. We're open to a commercial zone that would allow a bank with a drive-through to go in that location. We think it's a great commercial use in that banks are pretty, banks are quiet, banks are clean. And right now, even though I'm surprised by it fairly often, is that there are banks who are looking to be in this area, who are looking to put down a footprint in North Andover and have an attractive building and use it for whatever purposes they use it for, a marketing tool and to further their business. So that's our intent. We would love to get to over 2 acres and be able to do this as a by right project in CDD. There's just, as far as we can tell, no path to get there, which is why we're coming to the board and saying we'd like to develop what we think is appropriate for this part of Route 114, but we're asking for a form of relief to get there. Now, we talked with Gene about, does it make sense to try to rewrite the CDD district? It sounded like that's a very long process, and it was a simpler process to say, well, maybe these should just be a different business zone.
So the suggestion of general business was simply to start the dialogue. So part of the master plan was we have so many zoning districts in finite areas, and this is a perfect example of this. So the general business would just continue the plaza where Fuddruckers is up to these 2 parcels, but in your packet also is all the business zones and banks. Starts at B1, which, as you know from the 800 Mass Ave discussion, B1 is only in the old center at the brick store on the Hayscales. So that's the lowest level you can get.
I was not there last time, so my apologies to everyone else if I go over things that you've covered before. But first question I had is, and again, I know this is hypothetical, but I just want to get some context, is the one lot you're missing, would you do the same use if you added that lot, or would you do some variant of that, or how would it differ if you got the 3rd lot?
Sure. So we presented 2 different plans to the board, and they were in the first packet, and I can get them to you. With the 3 lots, we're anticipating 2 uses, 2 tenants on that building, or on that lot. One being, we're envisioning a cafe, coffee shop type use, and the bank as well. We think it lays out well with those 2 uses on there. And thank you, Gene, that's what we're proposing for all 3 lots would be 2 users, 2 tenants on the site. With the 2 lots, we would have 1 user on the site.
Okay. Now, the next question I had is, correct me if I'm wrong, but the lot that is next to the 3 that we're talking about is already a commercial building on that site, isn't there?
That's correct.
Okay.
As you go south and east, you get to a medical
Yeah.
office building, recently changed hands, and my understanding is they're putting some significant money into that
Yeah.
building.
Okay. How far along are you in terms of sort of your concepts and ideas and how you would lay it out, and whether you've talked to any of the people that live there?
The plan you see is pretty much a conceptual plan. We're doing blocking and space to see what fits there.
Yeah.
So we haven't done traffic analysis, we haven't done soil boring, that sort of thing. Not that
So
that'll
it's
make a
more along
difference,
the
but-
lines of the visuals, the in and outs, what the architecture is, that sort of thing, how
Right.
intense the use is. It sounds like you have a pretty good scheme of what you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, so we've developed commercial properties in town, we've developed residential properties in town. We think we have a pretty good feel for what fits in town and what doesn't. And quite frankly, the tenants that we have there are going to want a very attractive building as well. Your typical bank builds a nice-looking branch. We developed, along with the Lowell 5, the branch on Chickering Road there, which is,
Okay.
I
That's
think, an
very nice.
attractive
Yeah,
building.
Yeah, better than
So
a
I-
gas station. yeah.
Better than a gas station,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think we would work very closely with any boards that we go through for our permitting, as we have with our residential projects, to come up with a design that fits as well as it possibly can, and understanding that the intent of the CDD zone was almost a buffer between a commercial and a residential area. We would try to have these developments fit that
Yeah.
kind of residential feel as much as possible. I also live right behind there as well, so I'd like to have it look
Yeah.
as good as
Fair,
possible.
fair enough. I guess with that as context, the thought that I had, because I've been thinking about it some, but, wasn't familiar with all the details, is that we originally put the zone together with the idea that this was a tough area because it was, what it was like 50, 60 years ago when the houses were built is not the way it is there now. And the problem is there's a lot of parcels, relatively small in size, and they don't go back too far. And that's on both sides of the street. So how do you come up with something that sort of works for commercial development but also protects people? And we thought that at the time, given the layout of everything, that it made more sense to have a larger minimum lot size on the one side of the street than on the other. That's why they're different districts. But the thought that occurred to me, based on what you said, is I think the best solution to this is that we consider making the minimum lot size on the side of the street in that district smaller and not change anything else. And I think you can make a legitimate argument because the thought that came to me is if you take those three parcels and you still can't get the minimum and it's blocked further by an existing commercial building, it doesn't make any sense commercially. So maybe
We've met the intent of
maybe as a
aggregating as
planning
much
board,
as
we made a
possible.
mistake and we made the thing a little bit too high and maybe we should take it down a little bit. But that, for me, that would mean that you guys had all three parcels. Because I think if you only have two, I think you run into two problems. One is it's a little bit smaller, but then you got that other orphan parcel that's left, and it's two separate curb cuts, that was the reason why we wanted to have larger sized parcels to avoid multiple curb cuts. So if you could get all three lots together, I would definitely support reducing the maximum, the minimum lot size on that side of the street. I think that's the simplest solution.
So thank you for that. 2
Yeah.
points to that. One would be, my understanding of CDD1 is it probably has the same restriction CDD2 does in terms of restricting drive-throughs, and a bank would want a drive-through, because the CDD2 requires 5 acres for a drive-through, and I believe 400 feet from a residence.
That's for the drive-through of a restaurant.
So a bank does
The
not have
bank
that same
require-
restriction?
The
No.
bank requires 5 acres in the CDD2
For a
zoning
drive-through.
district.
But we could change that.
Okay.
Is
I
it
mean,
the same in the
it-
CDD1 district, is that right?
So it's by special permit, I'm still in 2, banks with the drive-through facility within CDD2 district on parcel or parcels collectively comprising at least 5 acres or more of land. So
Well, why don't we,
it is not in the CDD1.
Before we get into the kind of the details of how we would make it happen, it seems to me to make kind of, and this goes with both with kind of all of the proposals. Do we like the idea? Do we like the concept? And if we do, as a board, support it, then I think we should get into how we would make it happen. Because I think it's an interesting point. If we can keep it the same, that's great. But then,
Yeah.
does that alter other potential parcels for the good or bad?
Well, I think we need to do a little bit of work.
Right, so
I don't like GB because GB's completely open-ended, and once you do it one, that means you support it for one, you support it for every single parcel up and down that entire street on both sides. And we did have, if you remember, Gene, back 7 or 8 years ago, I think it was, we had a huge pitch battle about that on a parcel on the other side of the street. And what we were afraid of is that we'd end up with 2 or 3 fast food restaurants all in a row on that side of the street, which is not, I think, what people want. So,
But John, I'll go back. If it was to be the one use, the bank, that use already exists in B1, B2, B3, if we have a B4.
Say we
And that
change,
allows for a drive-through in any one of those.
well, it may be, the only concern that I would have is that if you start carving into the CDDs, we ought to at least look at the CDD and make sure it rationally makes sense based on the realities that exist now, because we did it, what we
Yeah.
thought was a good idea at the time. If it turns out it doesn't make sense,
Yeah.
we should change it.
I will say you can't get to 2 acres unless that medical
You-
office was
Well,
willing to
that's
give
what
it
I
up.
mean, you can't. So that would say to me, maybe we should make the minimum size a little bit smaller, because if you can't accumulate parcels, then why make it commercial at all?
let me ask you a question. If, say we made this parcel B1 or B2,
Yeah.
and then wanted to do a bank, would they have to come back for us for anything?
It's still, it would be site plan review to construct the bank.
Just site plan review,
Yeah.
not a special permit?
By special permit. Our
Okay.
site plan is by special permit.
Okay, what if they
It's
didn't?
not a use granted by special permit.
No.
Right, so what if they didn't want to build it? What if the bank fell through, now it's B1,
Yeah, so,
what powers do we have to say we
I
do or
mean,
do not?
one of the things that we've done a number of times in the past is that, and that's why I asked Alex the question of how firm your plans, how
Right.
good, is, when we designed the plaza where Burton's is,
Yeah.
we basically got them to stipulate certain uses you weren't going to allow, and what you were going to build was going to look like what this picture was, and if you didn't, then the zoning, it would be a covenant that would run with the land.
Okay.
So you can do that, and I think in some respects, how far we take it,
Right,
but I mean, reasonably put, because one of the things that it does is, by doing that, is it gives residents that live there a reassurance of what you're going to see. And so that they can say, hey, look, you should support this, don't worry about it, because not only do we have site plan review, more importantly, we have a stipulation now that you can see what it is. There was, Jeannie, it was probably before your time even, but people talk about it. I bet Ben would remember this, where the hardware store is now. That was before the days of site plan review, and people said we were going to put, it was a beautiful house with rose gardens. Peter, maybe you remember. And all of a sudden, something completely different, the mall that's relatively unattractive got built there, so,
yep.
yeah.
I will say the covenant has been used on the Dunkin' Donuts at Route 125 to make sure it will be a taxi depot, I believe,
Okay.
as well as automobile uses.
Luckily, I don't think there are too many taxi depots anymore.
Where Earthworks at the corner shop has gone 114.
Yeah.
Similar covenant on that property in order to rezone it for B2, which allowed the use that's there. I would say the only downside to going with the B1 or B2, and again, you can look through those uses, it really light lift there, but it continues to add to our disjointed zoning where you have.
That's a little bit why I'd rather keep the existing zone and tweak it if it can accommodate it without just totally destroying the zone.
So, and do you have okay, well, why don't, I think that's something we should definitely try to do some research on it and maybe see if we can kind of, if Gene, if you guys can come up with maybe a suggestion of a number. Are we talking 1 acre? Are we talking 1.5 acres?
Yeah, I mean, it's, there's two thoughts. One is I think it has to include, before we make this, it has to include the 3 parcels, because I think we'd make a mistake if it included just 2. But what I'd want to do is I want to look at all the parcels and see,
Right.
because on the other side of the commercial building, we ought to just make sure we don't run into the same problem over there, that you can't accumulate enough to make it work.
So is there-
Some of the challenge on this side is there's 2 paper streets. So just before Almagroga's Fence Company, there's a paper street, then you have that one building that I think is being used as real estate. Then there's a
Yeah.
paper street, and then you have the pavement, I think a seal coating type company is there, and sheds now. So in addition to not being able to aggregate them, you can get rid of that paper street, but it's just a long legal process.
It is, yeah, I mean.
You know, so there's so many things that are obstructing being
Yeah,
able
well, I
to
mean,
find-
the problem is when you get a little bit further down, it gets even narrower, I
Oh, yeah,
think.
the lots become triangle,
Yeah,
pie-shaped.
they become triangular, they're long, they got a lot of street frontage, but they don't
There's
go
no
back very
width.
far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess tonight, I don't know if you're ready to give a sense as whether two uses you'd be amenable to, or one use across the three parcels, just some direction, and
I
then,
mean, I don't mind the two. I would strongly prefer the three parcels to the two, because I think two creates a problem. You know, with two curb cuts, which is really what we wanted to avoid.
yep,
But I think either through tweaking the CDD, which is my instinctive preference, or looking at one of the other commercial zones, non-GB, I think we could put something together.
all right, I will say, just at a high level, CDD, both 1 and 2, were pretty limiting in terms of allowing for drive-throughs. There were recent articles that
Yeah.
did allow for it in both sides for restaurant use and the bank use, but they had pretty high
Yeah.
hurdles to meet it.
Yeah, I mean, as Alex said, the bank use tends to be more daytime and a little bit
Yep.
more benign in general than a restaurant use, so.
So why don't
Our
we,
proposal for 2 uses involved the bank and it involved a cafe, coffee shop that would also want a drive-through for that type of use. I mean, that's,
And that might be a little bit of a problem.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, the bank drive-through, I agree with John. The bank drive-through, I think, is pretty easy. That's not a high volume. People using them. Coffee shop drive-through there, I'm not necessarily sold on. So, okay.
And if I can speak to
Yeah.
one, so our initial intent was, of course, to put together these 3 lots, but I'd rather, of course, we would rather not have our hands tied as much as possible in moving forward with this. We want to continue to work to try to put that parcel in place, but sometimes it happens that for whatever reason, agreement. I mean, I look at the parcel on the other side by the Starbucks Plaza where there's still a residential property for whatever reason. I don't know the story. But it also strikes me because I've thought about this and what happens if things go well and we're able to do what we want and move forward with 2 lots. Is there ever a way to add that 3rd lot? And if I understand the town's laws, there's an ability to add, rather than going to town meeting, to add an adjoining use by special permit. So if for some reason we're able to move forward with these 2 and then at some point reach an agreement, that lot does not have to be an island forever. And in terms of multiple curb cuts, there is no curb cut to 182 Hillside on Turnpike Street right now, and there's no mechanism for there to be a commercial development there. So I think the worst case scenario, if we move forward, is that we build our development, our beautiful development on the corner there, and there continues to be a residence at 182 Hillside. So it's not that there would be another commercial development there, unless something else happens.
But if somebody wanted to do it, they would do it out on the 114. I mean, that's just the way they would.
Right, and they'd have to get quite a bit of relief to do that,
From
but
the
that's also possible. And not from the state, I mean, in terms of the lot size and everything, kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah,
What's the zoning for 182 right now? Is it just, is it residential?
CDD 2. They're
Same
in the,
zone.
they're
They're
in
in
the
the
zoning
same.
district,
The
yeah.
same zone.
So if we were to just change the lot size requirement on that, it would apply to that as well.
Correct. I forget the lot size there, but
It's
it's not.
around a half
If-
an acre.
At half an
If-
acre,
Right, if combined with other,
yeah, but,
it would have to, at that point, it would be an orphan lot, and it would have to be combined with either one.
right, if at some point,
So,
right.
yeah.
But if we,
And it's,
Point
frankly,
five
it's
seven.
better to do it up front than do it later, yeah,
sure,
yeah.
if we have it. Okay. Is there anyone from the public that wants to speak on this one?
Thank you.
I'm going to bring up the 3-lot plan for you, John.
Good evening, John Zarico, 182 Hillside. My wife Leslie and I own the 3rd parcel being discussed here. And I was at the previous meeting to learn and understand the process. Obviously, I've lived there for over 20 years, and so I'm familiar with the area, and I was part of the proposal to include our side of the 114 in the original rezoning as butters. We were notified that was going to be changed, so I rallied my neighbors to be included in that, just so I wouldn't be the last house on the street at some point, which the two-lot proposal would kind of make me. So that's going back over 10 years. So that was the last time I was here at the planning board. So we are supportive of the rezoning or the identifying of the lot size for the CCD2, assuming it would include our lot and not exclude us. When we were approached by Minco in 2012 about our property, and we have negotiated incrementally over many years. However, just want to go on record that based on the timeline of a number of months to do this before town meeting, we would have to make more progress in a matter of months than we made in a number of years as far as what our property might be worth to this proposal. And certainly being a resident there and other residents also concerned about the curb cuts, and a curb cut within 100 feet of Hillside Road would be more problematic in my mind than a curb cut at 250 feet away from Hillside Road. It would maybe be less traffic or less complicate that already busy intersection. So we would like to be included in that. However, my understanding is we reserve the right to withdraw from a proposal if we're not able to reach an agreement and not be included in any changes to any of this if we can't reach an agreement. So we've been working towards that, and we would like to think that might happen. But like I said, based on the timeline of a few months to a town meeting, it would take more progress in a few months than we've made in many years. So I'm not confident that that will happen. So I'm a little concerned about the proposal as such. So I want to go on record for that, okay?
Withdraw from that, what would that mean?
Well, if there was to be a proposal for changes to the zoning or the lot sizes, I remember when the CCD 1 and 2, the guy at the Town Country Real Estate withdrew at town meeting to have his lot excluded from that because of whatever, and I'm not a builder or a developer or anything, I'm just a homeowner, but I just would want to understand my rights as a homeowner to be included or to exclude, maybe in an effort to force an agreement or force a negotiation or agreement. And also, again, I believe that our lot, one, should be included in the name of public safety for the curb cut and for the whole area there. It would make sense to not be the last house. And again, that was my concern 20-something, when we bought the house. And we see that up and down 114, we see houses that are isolated, and I would not want to be that house, and nor did I ever want to be that house.
So,
So what happens may depend on what proposal goes forward. So if a proposal, sort of what John recommended today, to change the minimum requirements in all of the zoning district, that would affect every property in that district, including yours.
Right, so
that's not something you can withdraw from. If there was a proposal just to change the zoning for the 2 lots that Minco owns, that would not affect you. Okay, so it depends on what proposal goes forward to town meeting.
Yes, so all the lots are about 25,000 square feet, so between the 3, there's, 75,000 square feet. It's a pretty good size area. However, do you have our deed that I had submitted? Our deed clearly shows the utility easement and the driveway right-of-way access. That's 35 feet from the well, that shows the lot line there. That shows our easement over there, 2 lots, and we certainly would ask that be considered. That significantly reduces their usable space in those 2 lots by 10,000 square feet almost.
all right,
So-
and I would just clarify, him withdrawing, sounds like he made an amendment on the floor of town meeting to withdraw that lot, and it evidently passed, because it is a general business lot today. So I want to make sure you understand that
Yeah, well, again,
it probably took a town meeting amendment to the warrant article that was proposed, and it probably passed, but I wasn't there, I don't know the circumstance, but if it happened at town meeting, it probably followed that course. So,
It was the very end of
Yeah,
the district, and then. if
so
you
it
were-
didn't start again
Yeah.
after his property. He-
Yeah, it would have been more problematic if it would have been in the middle and he'd
Yes.
done that, yeah.
So I just wanted to go on record with those statements and consideration. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to being back and working with you on this. Thank you.
My thought would be to carry this over to the next meeting, and I think at that next meeting, we should try to be ready to give our sense of how we'd like to proceed with this, whether it's how we'd like to proceed.
I'll try to make a red line pass of what exists today on both sides and see how, if we can merge them.
I'll take a look and
Okay.
get back to it, my thoughts. I just
Great.
have to parse the language in the district again, so.
Great, thank you, John. Okay, great, thank you, Alex. Okay, Village Center Properties LLC and Stephanie Messina Suede, they have withdrawn this discussion item, so we will not carry that forward until any further meetings. So anyone wants to talk about that, you can't. Tom Zarico, 1665 Great Pond Road, potential amendment to article to the largest state condominium conversion zoning bylaw. All right.
Just say, in your packet today, earlier today, I sent everything I received up until 5 o'clock. 2 came in after, so you have hard copies of 2 that you probably didn't see because it wasn't in your email. And 2 additional comments have come in after 6 PM tonight, so I'll add those to the next meeting's packet.
And I just want to thank everyone who has submitted emails to us. They are helpful. We read them all. They all become part of the record, and they do help facilitate our discussion. So thank you for that. So why don't we start? Is there any new information that we should be thinking about, or just since our last meeting? We'll start there, and then we can go back with questions from the board. Jen, I know you weren't at the last meeting. If you have questions or anyone has comments, thoughts, and then we'll go to public, and then we'll loop around again. So anything new? Jean, anything from your end that's new?
No, it's just a multitude of additional email comments
Okay.
that you've received in your packet or email today.
And we have received comments against the zoning change. We have received comments in favor of the zoning change, and we've read them all. Tom, anything new on your end?
Just a couple of small items on this plan that I was just able to get into you recently. I just wanted to make sure that everybody had a perspective on what that garage, that detached garage would look like in terms of its location, its proximity to the surrounding streets, the setbacks, the wetlands, and that type of thing. Again, that. There's a few notes on that plan as well that speak to the issues that were brought up in a number of either letters or in conversation or in the dialogue previously about the height of that building or the prominence of that detached garage in this proposal. For reference, I think you see there that would have a ridge height of no more than elevation 120. It has the floor. A planned floor level of 102, which is essentially the pavement level in the back as it exists today. 120 is a couple of feet. Now that would be the ridge of that proposed garage. Cut into the slope, if it were to be built, would be between 1 and 6 feet below the level of the pavement on Academy Road. So it wouldn't be something that anyone would be looking up to. You'd have to find a way to look down onto it. It would be below the street grade by 1 to 6 feet. Just for clarification of the visual impact.
When you say it's below the street grade, is it the bottom or the top?
The top, the ridge, the actual ridge of the peak of the roof would be 1 to 5 feet below the
Okay.
pavement of Academy Road.
Oh, that's all.
Which
Yeah.
part of Academy Road? Because isn't it sloping?
Academy Road,
with-
the
with
lowest part.
garages?
Yes, you're right. If you were to take a perpendicular from the rear right corner of that
Okay.
proposed location, which is about 65 feet to to the lot line, which is actually the stone wall that you are probably all familiar with back there, and probably about 90 feet from the edge of pavement. If you were to take that perpendicular out at the bituminous curb, it's 121 and change feet, the elevation at that point, and then continues to rise as it goes up towards the Pickles residence and otherwise. So it goes up, at a gradual slope. It rises up to 125, 126 as you get to the edge of the property.
You said 1 to 5 or 1 to 6 feet. It's not because you're making an estimate. It's because Academy slopes on the low end. It's
Correct.
It's only 1 foot below the road, and on the high end, it's 5 feet below the road.
Yeah, that's a good clarification, Peter. Thank you, because it's not like we're saying it may be 120 or it may be 126
Yeah,
to the
I
ridge.
gotcha.
It's because the elevation of the street changes, as all
Okay.
of them do.
Thank you.
So thank you for actually helping to clarify that.
I
Sometimes
figured you were just testing to see if I was paying attention.
yeah, exactly. The other, again, this was just to clarify some of that visual impact. And if you look from the, Gene, if you can scroll up on that or pan back out, if you look from Mass Ave, actually from the Mass Ave side, if you can show us the front, we tried to locate that building and that theoretical landscaping, again, just representative of what could be done there, because all of this would be subject to special permit and other applications to all the boards and commissions if this were to go forward. Just to show that the line of sight from Mass Ave to that building could be almost completely intercepted. I think you can see that. That's with no changement, no narrowing of the pavement, just with a little bit of landscaping, and a little bit of treatment in that regard. You can virtually make that structure disappear even from the Mass Ave side. So just wanted to put that in perspective.
Is it wooded all the way up to Academy, or is it open field for that part?
It's largely wooded, but Gene, if you go to that other plan that I submitted, unfortunately, with the time, we weren't able to merge all of the existing conditions and onto this plan, but you can see a wood line approximately on that, John. It runs along the left-hand side, along the wetland, behind the annex building. A lot of big rocks up there. And a small river, but we're going to reroute that as we usually do with wetlands, so.
Yeah. Just like the
Sorry,
Dutch,
Gene.
yeah.
In any event, so there is some large growth up there, but there is some. The heavier growth is as you head up and further up Academy Road. It becomes more open and more field as you head down towards the church. So.
Yeah, there are definitely some woods, and then
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of like a swampy little woods, and goes up, and then kind of brambles, and then there's a nice, the neighbors have a really nice long yard as well.
Yeah, and then beyond the stone wall is actually it's actually for the most part the right of way of the town. There are a few large trees up in the right of way on the street side of the wall, if you will. So. The other thing in terms of updated information was really I spoke with Paul Hutchins to try to get a clarity on how he would interpret gross living area or gross square footage, I guess is the term that we're using, Gene. And he provided that, I think, to you, Gene. I also saw that.
Formalize it to the planning board. He just gave me kind of like just bullet notes of
Yeah.
his calculation, so.
Yeah, and that, in all honesty, that, and I'm a builder, and we calculate square footages all the time, and we interact with the building department, obviously. That would need some refinement in order to be crystal clear, I think, to any applicant anywhere. So, I mean, it's a good point of reference for him to provide, but I think that definition would need to be refined a little bit so that everybody could understand exactly what it means and how it would apply to this or any other building if, in fact, we were to go forward with a definitional change here.
So that's what I commented last time. I have found each building commissioner calculates that differently, so I asked him to put it in writing to me. He did submit some notes, but I've asked him to formalize it. I think that would have to be part of the amendment, is to better define what gross floor area is. It's already defined in a definition, but we would need to amend that to strengthen it.
Are there other places in the code that use the term?
Gross floor area?
Yeah.
Well, we use it for the watershed. You can't increase more than 25% or 50% depending on the existing structure
It's
size.
just if we change it here, we need to change it everywhere.
Well, we
Or
would-
change in the definition
Yeah,
section,
the
that's fine.
definition, right.
As long as we're consistent.
Yep.
And we want that same, as long as we want that same definition everywhere.
I think we would, and I think it's just the definition that needs to be
Okay?
agreed to and
And
amended.
and realistically, that's something that really ought to be done because it's used and applied in so many instances and referred to so many times. It's just, it rarely comes into a conflict, but it really should be refined a little bit more rather than being up to, varying judgments, I guess, down the road. But, so,
Can you just explain why there has to be a garage instead of just additional parking spaces?
well, it really gets into marketability and the desirability. I mean, what I do is build homes for a living. I mean, everybody knows that. We try to stay connected to and understand what it is people want and need and are willing to purchase. And it really comes down to that. Is it absolutely critical? Not necessarily. Does it add to the value of the homes, of the units? Absolutely. Is that good for everybody? Well, probably everybody except the person who's paying more for it. But I mean, it's I think most people would prefer that the value of anything new in town be greater rather than lesser if it's possible. So.
I'm not sold necessarily on the garage really either, but I guess that would be something, to me, that's something more for, it's good that we have all this information now, and I appreciate that you're being as transparent as possible as what you'd like to build. I mean, but to me, that's more of a special permit issue if this ever zoning change happened and things like that. Still good to talk about it now, but.
Yeah, it's important to talk about now because it's a threshold issue about whether you want to rezone the property to accommodate that use.
But the garage is not necessarily, even if you rezoned it, that doesn't necessarily mean you could do the garage.
No, but the fact that you could argue in the converse that if a garage is a possibility for this and the garage is not keeping, then maybe the zoning should not occur.
Again, what I've tried to do is be full disclosure with as much detail as I've developed so far. I know, this forum isn't to debate the details, or the technical details of this plan, and I realize that, and I hope everybody else does too. But I think in order as you said earlier, Ethan, in order for you folks to make a judgment as to whether or not this is something that you think is a good idea or supportable, in terms of the rewording or refinement of that zoning bylaw to allow this to appear before you, I think you need to know, and I think everybody needs to know what's expected, what's planned, what's conceived. So,
If the owners right now wanted to build a garage right now, similar to what's proposed, could they do it? Seems like it would be potentially an accessory use, right?
Right,
That they could just do right now.
as long as it complied with zoning.
Right. So
and obviously the historic concerns and authorities that.
I'm not saying
come
it's a
to
good
bear.
idea right now. I'm just saying
Yeah.
it could be done. Just something to
Right.
consider as we're debating
Right,
this.
right. If that large building were a single-family home,
Right. You could build
which
it.
is what it's zoned to be, essentially.
What I've heard, at least from some of the comments, are that it's more appropriate as a single-family home rather than units. That's at least some of the commentary.
Yes, and in fact, I'd like to talk about that a little bit, maybe after additional comments or before, as you please. But I think that's kind of, I think this discussion and this forum is less about some of the concerns that are real concerns about traffic, what, there would eventually have to be a traffic study to prove the impact, about lighting, to do an appropriate, dark sky lighting plan to make sure there's no issues or concerns or interference from to any of the abutters. But, I think that those are resolvable or addressable technical items that come down the road. This is really a discussion more about character and charm and density and how those things interplay here. I think, when we talk about density, one of the things that proposing eight units. Not a lot for the building, but a lot for the area. There's 16 homes. There's 8 homes, I think, on the Common. There's 8 homes on Academy Road. A couple of them, I think as many as 4 or 5 or 6 have multiple units. Some have 2, some have 3. I don't know where's the reasonable cutoff of acceptable density. I don't know. I've proposed something. But that's something for discussion and debate with you folks and the neighbors and ultimately the town. I mean, is that density acceptable? But we're really, that's, I think, the essence of the discussion and debate here is the charm, the character, the density. The other things are technical items that would be better addressed, I think, down the road if we get beyond the zoning.
Great, thank you, Tom.
I would
Okay.
add a couple of things.
Sure.
So today in R4, which isn't part of this warrant article, so R1, 2, and 3 are being entertained, but R4 allows for conversion of a multifamily home up to 5 units through the zoning board special permit. So 1 and 2 families, I believe, are allowed, and then you can, through special permit process, go up to 5. So speaking to density. And the other thing is we weren't able to ascertain the unintended consequences, what other lots would apply to this, what other structures would apply. I
We
would,
really needed Paul's information, which we just got last Tuesday or Wednesday, and I was out of town since then, but we'd have to take that information and then see where it might apply.
but you'd have to be able to get the assessor's information to tie to that, where they capture living area or finished area and not gross floor area. So
Right.
there'd have to be some type of judgment call saying, give me anything that's greater than 7,000 of living area, and then we'd have to calculate gross floor area for everybody in these zones.
When the bylaw is used, can you increase the square footage? So you say we changed it in the way that it, so that parcels with lesser acreage or lesser floor space can use it. When you're actually taking advantage of this, large estates one, what do you have the right to do? I guess my question is, so he's taking the footprint and making it into 8 units. Is there a set number of units, a set number of how much bigger you can make it?
There is, I
Right
forget
now
the
it's-
calculation.
Right now.
There's a set number.
It's acres, what, -2, I think?
Yeah, there's N-2.
N
Yeah.
minus 2 units from acre?
Yeah, so if you had a 10-acre lot, it's 8 units.
Okay, all right.
But there's a density bonus
Again,
provision.
I
too.
wasn't there for the prior conversation, so if we went all over this, but, I mean, that district was created to deal with one parcel, the Colonnade. That's it. That's the only place that has this in the entire town.
Actually, the Colonnade is an R5. Colonnade is a 2-acre piece of land.
It's not R5, is it?
It's R5. It's 18 units, I think.
But that
on
was
R5, John.
what was originally, that's why that district got created.
Used, Tom had thought it had never been used.
I don't think it's
thought
been used.
I
potentially-
think, no, I think it was I think they changed it later.
Okay,
But I think that's the reason why it was originally
okay,
used.
I can look
Well,
at their
the
zoning.
thing that I
on
do
top,
know is that the Colonnade is is on the assessor's records, is an R5.
but- okay.
and
I can
it's
look, I
it's a
can look it up,
2-acre
Tom,
piece.
where the
Yeah.
conversation goes on.
So John, to your point, there are 2 questions, I think. The most pressing one is this a good idea to change the printing museum and to allow up to 8 units? That's kind of question 1. Big picture, is that an idea that we can get behind? Yes or no? Question 2, if we can, how do you do it? The original thought, I think, when this first came up, was change the zoning on that parcel. now it's being proposed as a potential alternative is using this large estates type ordinance bylaw and reducing what's required. So not a zoning change, but something that affects multiple parcels. And maybe that's a good idea, maybe that's a bad idea. That would be a discussion to have, but I think we're still, if I'm correct, on the first question. But the second question is important too, you know, we're always concerned about unintended consequences, you know, but we're also concerned about spot zoning, so, you know, those are things we have to weigh. So why don't we start with, I don't know if anyone has questions or comments or thoughts that they want to share first, or do we want to jump into audience participation? So if there's anything that you guys want to, things you want to bring out or ask people to talk about, or thoughts you want to go over first, or we'll just jump into members of the public.
I like to listen.
You want to listen? John, listen? Okay, so why don't we go to members of the public that wish to speak out? Again, we've received all the emails. Anyone who has sent us emails or hasn't, you're more than welcome to come up and talk about really anything involving this. Be respectful, be as concise as possible, and start by telling us your name and address. So whoever wants to come up, just come on up.
That would be, in my mind, the best one to look at.
My name is Alan McLaren. I live at 32 Academy Road. I'm opposed to the changing of the zoning regulations or the changing of the bylaws for the purpose of building 8 residences in the existing museum building. My reasons for that are, 1, increasing the density on a small lot could be setting a new precedent for other developments around the common and in other parts of town as well. Seems to me that the bylaw allowing the conversions of large homes on large pieces of property was intended to maximize open space while keeping the residents per acre steady in a given neighborhood. I can think of other places that look like they'd qualify under the proposed regulation, but I don't know the square footages. The common and surrounding areas seem to me to be among the nicest in town. This project, I think, would be a downgrade. I'm among those who do not see this building as particularly special. It does not offend, but nor does it inspire. We're all accustomed to seeing it on the common, but that would hold true of anything that's been there for 50 years. I understand that the committee can only act on a proposal that is before it. That does not mean that there might not be other proposals in the future that would better satisfy the competing demands of this location. Thank you.
Is there anyone else?
Hi, my name is Dave Pickle. I live on 135 Academy Road with my wife, and we are on a lot that abuts this property. And I appreciate the definition that you gave tonight about the parking garage. We're obviously somewhat concerned about condos on the common. I understand the Historical Society's issues in terms of this building and the state that it's currently in and their needs for funds, and I understand this is a business plan that makes sense to them. I also believe this is a business plan that makes sense to Mr. Zarico as a developer. But I think the question really also has to involve what makes sense for Academy Road, and in a greater sort of perspective, what makes most sense for the town. We've heard a lot of pluses and minuses, what this might mean for other properties in terms of precedents. I think I've heard that it's hard to determine, or it's hard to figure out if there are other properties that this type of activity could affect in the future. I think that needs to be understood. Although I know we're speaking about the building itself, I just don't understand how, as a potential buyer and a property owner, why someone would want to invest the amount of funds that we've heard that these units might sell for as a 2-unit property if there's not in a garage parking that's available. I think the property value would go down somewhat, but I leave that up to the developer in terms of what could or could not happen. I have to imagine that most of the people that would be interested in a project and living in a space like this would likely be two-car owners as a potential family, or two people living, at least some of them would. I looked at the plan there, and it looks like there's 4 or 5 or 6 additional parking spaces on the other side of the garage. I've got to believe that this would have to allow for parking for maybe 18 to 20 cars at one point, given whether these are two-car owner units or there's people that are visiting. And I think we need to figure out, understand what that parking might look like down the road. I think I understood that the parking garage is below the level of the street, the grade, on both corners. It probably will be visible from our property, which I don't think is a major perspective or concern of the planning board, but it's obviously a concern to us. And I'd like to hope that if this project were to move forward, if it were to be proposed to town meeting as you are in favor and the town meeting were to vote for it, that we would have some commitment that there would be investment made in the landscaping around this building, not to detract from the property values that are around it, because I'm concerned that an 8-unit condominium that borders on my property could affect the value of my property down the road. That may or may not be a concern, but it's a concern to me. And again, I just don't see this property moving forward without a parking garage. Maybe it could, but I'd like to understand how that would work. There's a certain amount of purchase money that needs to go into this. There's a certain amount of money that will need to go into making this building work. I just don't see the margin if there's not a garage there. So we may not be talking about that specifically right now, but I think it needs to be understood that it's going to be there. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Stan Novak, 26 Pembroke Road. I'm obviously not an abutter, but I drive by that property every day. Traffic on that road is terrible. It backs up from the Rotary back to Chickering, sometimes back to 495. Has any consideration been given as to what putting a whole bunch of units in is going to do to traffic on Mass Ave every morning?
We don't have a traffic study yet. I can say, I mean, what's being proposed is 8 units, residential, generally.
As he pointed out, 8 units could mean 16 cars. They could have a couple teenagers. You could have
Right, so
20, 24 cars. They could be taking the parking spaces that are on the other side of the,
so
park.
generally what we see with multifamily residential of this size is generally have a couple of trips in the morning and a couple of trips in the afternoon. So, I mean, obviously we'd wait to hear more about traffic later on, but if you imagine 15 people leaving in the morning and 15 people coming in the afternoon, what impact that would have.
I mean, it's bad already, so anything, one more car is going to make it worse. Secondly, just bringing up the whole character of that area isn't condos. There aren't any other condos there. Every house, that surrounds the park is a beautiful old colonial. No matter how lovely you make condos, they're not going to fit in with the area. And on that grounds alone, I would like to say this isn't a good idea. Recently, a few years ago, the town spent a whole lot of money, I think a couple $1 million, buying the land that sort of surrounds Stevens Estate so they could own that whole big hill that you see when you drive around Great Pond Road. Building there, I think, would be less detrimental to the town than building this will be. Thanks.
Thank you. So I think, to Mr. Novak, one of the really key things for us to consider is the character, and Tom spoke about it, and Stan spoke about it. I think that is, and we'll discuss that as we go further. And I encourage people to kind of talk about that, because that's one of the things, at least me individually, that I'm struggling with, is I see the phrase condos on the common, and I think the phrase in itself has a negative connotation. But how at least I'm trying to picture is, if I just were to drive by this building as proposed 5 years from now and I knew nothing about it, how would I see it? Would it be something that I was like, wow, this is different, this doesn't fit in? Or would it be just a building that I drive by and I'm like, I don't notice. And that's kind of what I'm, at least me personally, am thinking about when I see these. Would I see all this traffic coming in and out? Would I notice it, or would I drive by and it would be the same?
From my impression, I think when Peter and I were part of the committee to address this, that was sort of, I think, the salient consideration that I had, the single most important thing. And I think we got to learn a lot about the old center as a sort of living, breathing organism that balances, we heard there's traffic there, but it is, the old center and Academy Road are a jewel. I mean, absolute jewel. It's probably one of the best single commons in Massachusetts. If there is another street in Massachusetts that's as nice as Academy Road, I don't know of it. I mean, really, I think in a sense, believe it or not, it's understated. So for me, putting in a use that is completely different from the uses that are there today, I think can be tremendously disruptive in ways that we wouldn't even imagine. I mean, think about it, is that you're going to have cars there. Sorry, you're going to have cars in the front of that place all the time. You're going to have lighting all the time. Every other house there is basically a house of a single type and character and size. This is different. It's an intrusion, and I think it'll change the balance of the old center. That's the concern of the reservation. I haven't heard anything yet that would have me move in a different
So
direction.
can you give more specifics on how? Because that's what I'm struggling with, is that makes sense to me, at least of a reason why we wouldn't be supported, but how would it be different? That's what I'm struggling with.
Well, it would be different because you have a property that instead of single-family use on larger lots, you're going to have multifamily use on a small lot. So what you're going to have is, there could be a garage in the back. Well, first of all, there's no other garages anywhere in the old center that look anything like that. And maybe you can't see it, but it's different. And I'm sorry, there are going to be a lot of parking in the front of that property. There's going to be a lot of lights. Lights will be on at hours that they're not on today. It will be, just by the fact that in a building that's maybe the size of 2 or 3 houses in that thing, there'll be 8 in close proximity. So I think it changes a lot. I think it changes the entire character of what goes on in that whole area.
I think I agree with you, John. I think it changes the characters in a lot of perhaps small ways when viewed individually, but cumulatively, if you moved away for 2 years, came back and it was condos as you drove down Mass Ave, I think you'd just do a double take, like what happened? And what do I mean? Well, it's going to be 8 mailboxes. It's going to be on trash day, you bring out the trash can and the recycling, so there's going to be 16 trash cans out front. Like you say, there's going to be cars parked out there like there isn't now. I feel like the Historical Society must be in a tremendously conflicted position here, just inherently conflicted. It's a private organization, and the leadership has a fiduciary duty, right, to ensure the continuation of that private organization. In order to do that, they need to maximize their revenue. But the conflicted position, it seems to me, that they find themselves in is, it's not a private organization, I don't know, studying rivers. It's a private organization for the preservation of history, and now they're advocating for dramatic change in what is one of the most pristine historic areas of town. We have a historical society that's advocating for condos on the common. It's a conflicted position. I would argue that the building, and where I'm coming from is a sort of a strange place. I'm a native. I was born here, I grew up here, graduated from high school, left for 40 years. So I'm a native and I'm a newcomer. I'm both. I would argue that the only reason that building belongs there is not because of the facade, not because it ever blended in, not because it was a historic structure. The only reason it ever belonged there is because It was a treasure house of the textile history that was so central to this region. And, you know, the organization that was responsible for it, it's gone. I think for a good idea, went to the Textile Museum in Lowell. That seemed like probably a good idea, but now that's closed. Do you know where the Merrimack Valley textile history is? It's gone to upstate New York, all of it. I don't think the building would ever have gone there if it wasn't housing this treasured collection that has been lost. So I disagree with the notion that, well, it's iconic, it's historic. What was in it was historic. And I don't think the Stevens family ever would have proposed to put that building there for condos. So in that sense, it's a radical change. But the other part of the dilemma here, the conflicted position, I think, of the Historical Society is the building has been just horribly ignored. We were in it with the working group. It's falling apart. And what sort of economics make sense to do something? So I also feel like, if it is going to be developed, we've got somebody in Tom here who's got a tremendous track record of doing good things in the town. So, I mean, if it goes that way, we got the right guy. But I just have a really hard time with sort of what appears to be this very conflicted position of the Historic Society arguing that there's something associated with their mission by putting condos in a building that never would have been there if it wasn't for the purpose of housing a treasured collection which has been lost. And at the same time, I'm also a big fan of building reuse. Right. I just think building reuse is a good idea. The problem is there's no economically viable reuse for the purpose for which the building was intended and for the only purpose that justifies where it's located, a museum of our history. And condos are not part of our history.
And that's one of the things that I'm struggling with too, because I know Mr. Wakeman, who was here last time, had some really good ideas about potential reuses. But one of the concerns that I keep coming back to is if none of those happen, then we're going to have a dilapidated building, maybe that falls down or gets torn down, and that's going to look terrible. So what happens if one of those came to fruition? Great, but if they don't,
well,
what happens? And maybe we wait. Right. Maybe we wait till that happens. I don't know.
In one of the letters, there's mention of a historic building in town, which apparently is at risk of being torn down and replaced with a new house. And one of the ideas that was floated at the work group was, the condos, an economically viable way to do something with the structure with a very reputable developer. That was one. Two was just get rid of it, make it open space, you're done. The problem with that is the economics. How, who's going to pay for that? And then the third one was, is there a way to get rid of the building and hold it for the next historic building, which otherwise would be lost to the community? And what I have seen in some of the letters is maybe there's a way for CPC to play a role in that. I don't know. But then it brings us back to, this is not a proposal by the planning board. This is essentially a proposal by the owner, which is the Historic Society, with what I think is this conflicted position. They're going to gain a lot more money to ensure the continued survival of their private organization by developing condos than they would by instead preserving the historic nature of the common, perhaps as a place to relocate a historic site. It won't generate as much revenue for the Historic Society. So, they're in a terrible position. The financial future of the Historical Society in this example depends on doing something which I think is antithetical to their mission.
Tom, we'll get back to you. Let me see if there's anyone else that wants to come forward. Hi.
My name is Eva Homery, 27 Young Road. I am the president of the Improvement Society in North Andover, so you know our history. We're responsible for the common as it is today, with the last parcels that we had gifted to the town in 1959. So I'm also a Historical Society member. I think I'm current, but past member, maybe my dues are due, but I am very sympathetic to the plight of the Historical Society. I have toured the building as a potential reuse for the town, so I know what condition it's in. I also am very respectful of Tom and what he's done in town, but I would like you to know that the Improvement Society, while we haven't met since this issue has been up, I'm hoping that at our next board meeting early in the year, we'll be able to talk about the possibility of bringing forward a proposal talking about the feasibility of an alternate use for the land. Sponsoring, perhaps at town meeting, an article which could talk about open space, acquiring the site as that landing pad for the historical building, doing something to help the Historical Society with getting some money for this. I don't know what exactly will happen, but we're interested and through Brad, we're talking with someone who's involved in consulting regarding open spaces. So we are going to consider hiring him and see what other options there may be. So perhaps we're the right people to move this all forward. I just need to get our board to agree, because we do have, there are a lot of allegiances that we have on our board. To the Historical Society, of course to the Common, so some people are not quite sure, and we're still doing a lot of fact-finding. But I just want you to know that we're, I think, going to be willing to come forward and take up this banner and see what other options there may be.
So I think I can say we would certainly appreciate that. We're going to keep going on the track that we're on with the proposal that we have.
Yes.
But, and our business is to try to make the best decision we can for the town. So the more options we have, I think the better. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. 279 Winter Street. I'm a member of the board of the Historical Society. Yes, we have spent a lot of time and a lot of effort on this building. Going back to when I first joined the board in 2003, we did a self-study. What are we going to do? How are we going to function? One of the main things is we had all these buildings and all these properties, and that's a real asset, but it's a burden because we have to keep them up. All of them. Then we did a feasibility study. We had a pro bono on museum printing, while, the Rogers building, while it was still occupied. In 2008, they told us it was going to be $1 million to $1.5 million just to make the building feasible for occupancy of something other than the museum there. We did another study of the conditions that had deteriorated anymore. I think some of you have seen this in 2012. Of course, all these studies were done in the middle of the recessions. This is 1.5, no furnishings, no landscaping, no parking, just the bare bones. That's 6 years ago. The price has gone up. To tear it down is hundreds of thousands of dollars, because this isn't a house, a wooden house. It's got floors this thick. So we're in a conundrum. So a few years ago, we said, okay, the museum is finally moving out. We've been trying to push them out for quite a while because they didn't live up to their bargain. We were good citizens. Museum came in, free rent. Okay, you're going to put in an elevator, you're going to keep it up. They didn't do any of that. They put in some bathrooms and a ramp. They turned off electricity. They turned off the pumps, water in the basement. You've seen all of that. So what are we going to do? So we've been spending the last 2 years entertaining different proposals, and you've heard a lot of this. And we were looking really for quiet offices And not a doctor's office where there'd be all these people visiting, no visitors, just the employees. I wasn't at the working group, but my understanding of the working group, all that, those options were rejected as not viable. And so there's still lots of ideas out there, but nobody can come up with how to do it until we decide that I'm going to change it from condos on the common to townhouses. I think that sounds better. And in reality, that's what it is townhouses. I don't know about the garbage, 8 of them out. They'll probably have something, different way of doing it. 16 cars, maybe 20 cars. But any other use that some people are talking about, we got to find a museum, is going to have far more than 16 cars. We were looking at using it. We can't afford to use that space. We can't afford the operations. If we expanded the museum in there, there'd be more cars. I mean, people are used to not having any cars because it wasn't a viable museum, but there would have been use of cars. So it is a conundrum. We think that this was the best solution for the common and for the neighbors. The least amount of traffic, the least amount of lighting, the least amount of activity. People would be entering in the rear. Their activities are in the rear of the building. I'd also like to note that the Improvement Society gave the common to the town in 1959, and this building was erected in 1960. There are a lot of people in town who really like this building and think it should be preserved because it is the history. This building is the history of North Andover. It was a textile museum. It honors our textile history. So.
Sure.
I'm Brad Wakeman, 140 Academy Road. At the last meeting, I expressed my admiration of Tom Zarico and my appreciation for the work of the Historical Society, and that remains. But again, it's not about Tom or the Historical Society today. It's about 100 years from now, which is what we should be thinking about. And we're all spending a lot of time on this issue. But I think the process of how the Historical Society got to this proposal to change the zoning bylaw is a point worth considering. Here's how I see it. In February 2018, the Historical Society went to the Planning Board to request a zoning change to commercial. It said its goals were to retain ownership and control, and they would decide the tenants and the uses in the building and to generate revenue. The Planning Board heard this proposal and formed a working group that met during the summer. We heard that the building had been vacant for some time, had fallen in disrepair. I and many of you toured the building in February and observed that disrepair, significant mold, areas open to the weather, rotten window frames, and perhaps a foot of standing water in the basement. Throughout the summer and early fall, we heard at the working group meetings a variety of plans, all involving the Historical Society retaining ownership. Then at the October 25th meeting, the Historical Society said it would not retain ownership and would not decide the future tenants, but rather it had entered into an agreement to sell the building through a memorandum of understanding. This was a new entry. It was then we learned the Historical Society had signed this MOU. We learned about the plans to convert the Museum of Printing into 8 condos and an 8-car garage that would be cut into the slope and have a peaked roof for storage. And we learned that the Historical Society was unanimous, with the exception of Historical Society board member Tom Zarico, who recused. And this brought us here tonight and might bring us to town meeting. And this process, I would say, is unusual. Sometime in those 8 weeks, between August 30th and October 25th, the Historical Society concluded that residential condos was the best use, that Tom's proposal was the best plan and is in the best interest of the society, and $1 million was a demonstrably fair price for the land and the structure. I don't know what a fair price is. The assessor seems to think it's worth $3 million. That seems a bit high to me. A more conventional process might involve concluding on a plan. What is it we want to do with this building? Maybe convert it to condos, soliciting input from the membership, maybe asking the members, determining project specifications. We want 8 condos. We want to maintain the facade. Determining a list of potential developers, developing an RFP, executing a selection process, and then determining the best bid. And the Historical Society is a private organization, so they can do what they want, but they are also a public charity. So when you're a public charity, such as the Historical Society, disposing of charitable assets should have a very careful process. And that's just not me saying so. And I gave you references to what the Attorney General has said on this matter about transferring things at fair value and to whom they should be transferred to, that it should be at arm's length. And we know that both of these things could be challenged. So we're here talking about a zoning change, but it's not even clear to me that, as a member of the Historical Society, that they can even sell the property to Tom. And I gave you references to their bylaws that say that before something can be sold, there needs to be 2 steps. The Board of Directors vote on it. They did that. And a vote of the society. They did not call a vote of the meeting before they executed that memorandum of understanding. And to my knowledge, they have not even informed its membership of this proposal.
Private issue?
Well, it isn't, except that we're here before you tonight about something that is just so fundamentally flawed. I don't think it could even go forward.
Why?
And I think because their bylaws prohibit the sale.
But I guess their bylaws don't impact whether or not we can make a zoning change, right? Or whether town meeting could impact a zoning change. If there was zoning change went forward and it changed to, or we changed the requirements under the bylaw that we have.
Yep.
And now it qualified for conversion.
Yeah.
Then, and then the sale tried to go through and someone filed a lawsuit, filing an injunction, whether a court decided whatever, which way, that really wouldn't impact a zoning change.
Totally agree, but I think that, but I think what's driving your decision tonight to make this, or what's driving your decision of saying, gee, should we make, is the proposal in front of you, which I'm saying is so flawed that, you know, it could be that we're wasting our time on this.
I see, okay.
I concede your point that they are different, but I say they're related. So so it appears to me that the transaction seems to be contrary to at least the spirit of the bylaws. And the route to get here, I think, seems a bit odd. As I understand it, you're being asked to amend the large estate condominium conversion bylaw. And the way I read that is it allows a condo conversion of a large estate. That is to say, a big house that is on more than 10 acres. Well, to state the obvious, the Museum of Printing is not a large estate. It's not a big house. It's not on 10 acres. It's on less than 2 acres. So what does this large estate condo conversion bylaw have to do with the Museum of Printing? It seems like it's twisting this bylaw into a pretzel in order to make it work for this particular property, which would then have implications across the town. And finally, I think there are less intrusive solutions that have not been pursued fully, like creating open space, creating the landing pad, as Eva spoke about, for a historical house, or alternative museum uses. So in conclusion, we all want success for our friend and neighbor Tom Zarico, and we all want the Historical Society to thrive in executing its core mission. And we all think that people should have the liberty to do what they want with their property within the rules we have. But this isn't about this. This is about the Historical Society asking us, the town, to change those rules related to large estates, which has nothing to do with the Museum of Printing, as a result of a process that may be flawed. So I'm hoping that these points, together with what you've heard from people that live nearby, folks in the library area, folks that live on Main Street downtown, folks that live out country, people new to town, people that have been farming in the old center for over 200 years, like the Kittredges, people that wait in traffic to get through the Rotary, that all of this will result in the planning board saying to the Historical Society, look, I get it. $1 million is great, and we all want you to be successful. And these 8 $600,000 condominiums may help solve some housing need, But the Common is sacred ground in North Andover, and a zoning change is a really big deal, particularly on the Common, that we have spent over 100 years building and improving. And there may be better alternatives, so let's, for now, it might be best to pause, slow down, and explore more fully and comprehensively those alternatives. That's my request.
Points, questions, if I might. The first point about the bylaws, I don't think we're really going to delve into that because I really do see that that's a private issue, though I understand where you're coming from on that. The second point about the change to the large estate, we're going to kind of put that off because that, I agree with you, that it doesn't necessarily seem like the fit and that we probably would be changing that bylaw to make this work. So yes, you're right. And the question is that a good idea? We don't, if the board thought that this proposal was a good idea, we don't have to use that mechanism. We could suggest a zoning change to make this, what was it, R3, right? We could just change the zoning on this. So that gets rid of that issue. I think the large estates was Mr. Zarico's idea to actually make this less impactful and to make it more fair across the board in North Andover. So there are different ways that if the planning board was supportive of this, to make it happen. So we'll kind of put that aside because there are some real questions about whether that is a good way to go about it. It may be. And me personally, I actually really like that particular bylaw or the idea behind that bylaw. And talking about Peter's reuse, I was in New Orleans a month ago, and a lot of their antebellum, gorgeous mansions, houses have been changed into multifamily condos. You can't tell from the outside, but you go inside and they're divided into units. And I think at some point with these larger estates, that's going to be the only way that they stay in use and don't get knocked down and made into little McMansions. So I do think there is a place for this ordinance and for expanding it in town. I don't know if this is appropriate for it, but there is a place for it. The third point is I think the crux of it is this a good idea? Are there better ideas? If there are better ideas, when are they coming? How are they coming? Is someone paying for them? Should we just wait, or should we take the proposal that's here right now? And those are the questions that I think we're really struggling with.
And to your last point, are there better ideas? And I think Tom had a very valid point at the last meeting, which is, look, I came up with an idea.
Right.
So this has been the Historical Society has been struggling with this for probably more than a decade, and now I've come up with an idea, and nobody else has come up with an idea.
Right.
But if you talk to Historical Society not board members, you talk to Historical Society members, they'll say, I had no idea this was coming forward. Are there better ideas? They're not aware of that, unless there has been communication to the membership that I'm unaware of, but I don't think there has been. And so I don't think there's been an opportunity for there to be alternative measures. I think we have an idea that sounds great, executed by a great guy, but I'm saying there's, I think, enough opposition to this and enough concerns about this that it might be worth pausing.
Okay, great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Tom, I'll get you back up there. I just want to see if there's anyone else that wants to add anything first.
Hello, my name is Paul Craney. I live on the Common, 80 Osgood, so I'm a Mass in Osgood, small yellow house there. I've written an email to you about this when it first came up. I know, Tom, we walked dogs together. My wife and I moved to town about 6 years ago. We joined the Historical Society soon after because we own one of the old homes on the Common. I have not been notified as a member who lives on the Common, so I just want the record to know that as a member who lives on the Common, I have not been contacted. And funny enough, I actually renewed my membership this week, and that was the first question I asked to the staff, and they said they are not permitted or allowed to tell their members. Only the board members are.
I'm we didn't expect to have all this happen until after the holidays. We have a communication plan. We will be calling meetings. We are going to be operating under the bylaws, the correct bylaws, et cetera, et cetera. And there's been some comments sent about how we haven't done our due diligence. And we've been spending 5-10 years doing our due diligence, especially in the last 2 years. We all know last year it can't be a secret. We didn't want to repurpose this to everybody on the common because last year we were coming forth, and some of you were at those meetings, asking for a zoning bylaw for a business or a commercial. I don't know which terminology it is. So everyone is aware that we're trying to do something with that building. The condo idea only came up in late October. We're preparing materials to inform our membership. Quite frankly, with Christmas coming, I didn't think anyone would read them. I'm going to wait for the first week of January. And then we will have a meeting. And we ought to have probably several meetings with our membership. Thank you.
Interplay between members and notice.
No, I'm not going to interplay.
All right, 'cause
I'll just let you know I'm going to forward
really
the
not
email
that
to the board. That's all.
interested. All right.
And it is true. I just became a member again this past week. I have an email. I'll just forward to the board so you guys see it in record.
Okay, great. All right. Please. I know it's hard to be quiet for half an hour, I know.
It was so hard. Thank you for letting me return. A couple of things. First of all, I thank people who said nice things about me. I really appreciate that. It means a lot to me and to all of my family. Thank you, and my friends. A couple of technical things, just as we're talking this thing through, just to make sure that everything is understood, if not liked, at least understood. In terms of, somebody brought up comments about the parking. Again, this concept plan, which is being modified, improved, refined, showed an 8-car garage, showed 8 parking spots directly across from them, and showed 8 parking spots out front, where there is parking already. There's nothing new there. There is no proposed new parking, if you will, other than the garage building itself. That parking exists. The parking to the left of the building exists. Everybody knows that's where you get your speeding tickets on a regular basis. That parking area exists today.
Yeah, the question more, I think, as John and Peter raised, is it used at night? Is it, whereas here it may be?
Well, it may be with visitors, it may be.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is that with a 2-bedroom unit, I mean, statistically speaking, we'd get into this kind of detail. You can maybe expect 2 cars. There's places for all of those cars, for all of those people, and then some, where it exists today and behind the building. I just wanted to clarify that because it does exist. In terms of things like trash, condominium owners can't put their trash out at the curb. The town does not pick up any condominium trash at all. So not only is there no service impact or cost impact, it has to be contained, controlled, concealed completely from sight, on site, and picked up on a regular scheduled basis. That's just the rules.
Is there a dumpster there now? I feel like there.
Well, no, because there's nothing going on there.
Okay.
Yes, there's no dumpster there now, but there has to be a provision for a spot for it in a concealed, fenced area. And again, just these are minor things, but I just want to make sure that people do understand what does matter and what doesn't matter when we're thinking this thing through. In terms of lighting, I understand that. However, we just added 20-some-odd streetlights on the common in the last couple of years. Nobody moved because of them, as far as I know. I mean, we're not talking about a lot of lighting here. We're talking about dark sky lighting, if and where it exists, deliberately placed, selectively placed. Again, we just lit up the common with streetlights in the last couple of years. I don't know how many there are. I tried to count them when I was walking the dog, but got distracted. So anyway, I think everybody understands how precious this is. This building is more precious to the Historical Society, I suppose, than it is maybe to the people on Academy Road or other folks. It was a gift from a loved family member. I mean, anybody ever get a gift? It's Christmas. Something that you really maybe didn't fit just right. Maybe you didn't like the color of it, but you kept it because it was a gift of some value. That's what this was. To a lot of people, it's a very pretty building. To other people, it isn't. It's been there since the year I was born. When we talk about character, I've never known North Andover without that building. Again, 16 homes in that Academy Road common area. I think at least 13 of them moved there since this building was there. Everybody moved there, at least in part, because of the character of the town, of the neighborhood, of the common. And that was the single most visible part of the character of that part of our town. I don't think anybody can deny that. It is a big building. But it's the most dominant piece of the character. Nobody moved in thinking, I can't wait till 16 years from now when they blow that thing up and get rid of it. It's part of the character. So again, it's a very tough discussion, but for a lot of us, that is part of the town. And I've said this before, but history doesn't just start at 100. If all the houses down there were knocked down when they were 60 years old, they wouldn't be there. There's a lot that went into that building. And it does mean something to the owners and to a lot of us who grew up here and know that building. My suggestion, this is really a very emotional, very difficult discussion. We all know how important this is. I'm proud of the fact that I'm a lightning rod here, that there's an intense discussion going on about this building. I think that's good. It's taken a long time for that to really happen. There's been plenty of wishy-washy, nebulous discussions about this building for years. But now there's something real. Somebody's willing to do something. And I think at a minimum, the board should think about the value of that. And everybody has to trust everybody. But run parallel tracks. Considering a zoning modification to that bylaw doesn't mean this happens. All it means is somebody better come in with a really, really, really good plan to even have any consideration given to it in the future for the whole town to see. At least give that urgency to this process. And those other things that may come to pass. Everybody has a great idea. Everybody wants this place to look beautiful, be quiet, lights off at night, no visitors, no traffic. Everybody wants that. But that's not going to be. So if somebody comes up with something that's a better parallel track and the Historical Society sees that and agrees with it, what's the harm? Parallel tracks work. We did this with Carter Field. A lot of good things can happen. But if we decide that we're going to derail the train that's generating the activity and generating the intelligent discussion, then we're going to be having this discussion again in 5 and 10 years, and I'm too old for that. And you saw me rubbing my knee. I can barely walk, so I'm done unless you have questions for me. Thank you all.
Thank you. All right. Anything that anybody else wants to add at the moment? If not, I think we'll continue this for our next meeting. I agree. I think your proposal has garnered action. And sometimes as a reaction, sometimes that's a reinforcement, sometimes that's someone else coming in. But those are very good things. So I do think we should continue to move this forward with the proposal that we have before us. If anything new comes from the Improvement Society, from other benefactors, from anyone, please continue to bring it forward. We're going to continue to discuss this. either at the next meeting, which is January 8th, or the meeting after that, we will vote or at least indicate our position about whether this could go forward as a planning board sponsored. So people have a month to really put things on the table. So keep working. Great, thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the December 4th meeting?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so that's 3 votes, 1 abstain, who's not at the December 4th meeting. And, motion to adjourn?
Before we do that,
Yep.
what are we doing on A, DPW, and B, the stormwater report?
Do not know. Well, I will go over that with Gene.
Can you?
Yeah.
Okay,
You
thanks.
want to try to put something on for, let's try to put something together for the
I'd
end.
like to put something on when we have a meeting that has
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
and one at a time, not
Yeah.
both together. But
Yeah. Okay.
So we got a response from the DPW yesterday, and if the chair wants to address it, then
Can we get a motion to adjourn?
motion adjourned.
All in favor? Yes, yes.